Hello there and welcome to our overview of the social and economic long-term monitoring program for the Great Barrier Reef, a program we affectionately call the CELTEMP. My name is Nadine Marshall. I'm with CSIRO based here in Townsville, and our job is to inspire you to incorporate and consider the human dimension in natural resource management. And we're hoping to do this by sharing with you our story. I want you to imagine how difficult it must be to manage a natural resource as impressive as the Great Barrier Reef. Imagine managing the competing interests and distributing the benefits from the reef across commercial fishing, marine tourism, shipping, ports, coastal development, coastal residents, mining, as well as farmers and producers upstream. From within this context, the CELTEMP came about. Reef managers repeatedly made calls for better information and knowledge about the human dimension of the Great Barrier Reef. In 2011, the CELTEMP was born as a result of funding from the National Environment Program, NERP. Our mission then became to work with reef managers to help them make better decisions. We focus on the main interest groups within the region: marine tourism, commercial fishing, recreational users, coastal communities, Australians at large, and ports and shipping, and are beginning to include traditional owners, agricultural industries and mining. We ask similar questions of all interest groups in the same way at the same time. This should give us a bird's eye view of what is occurring within the region and how interest groups intersect with each other and derive benefits from the Great Barrier Reef. We use all of the existing data sets within the region that we can access, and have also developed our own database, which currently represents a baseline of nearly 8,500 people. There have been many people associated with the CELTEMP. For now, I'd like to introduce you to our team of researchers across CSIRO, James Cook University and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. We're very proud of our relationship with the Marine Park Authority. They keep our results highly relevant and they get our data hot off the press.
Hello there. I'm Margaret Gooch from the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, and I've been working with the CELTEMP even before its inception. One of the strengths of the CELTEMP has been its collaborative approach to its design and development. Governments, such as our organisation, industry and community have been closely involved in what gets measured and how, through their involvement in the steering committee, advisory panel or working groups, the data is discussed. We have 10 working groups, each focused on one of the main interest groups in the region. When you look at how many people are actually involved behind the scenes in CELTEMP, it comes to around 100 people. Their involvement is highly structured, representative as possible, and they really are the secret to the success of the CELTEMP. The success of a social and economic long-term monitoring program can only occur with well-translated, cutting-edge data that feeds directly into management processes, and that's what the CELTEMP does. Each working group puts out its own report that can be found on the eAtlas website. Each report is a standalone document, but you can see that they all report on similar types of information. The data that are collected for all working groups describes how people use the reef, derive well-being from the reef, are dependent on the reef, and also how they relate to the reef in terms of their values, perceptions, aspirations, attitudes, knowledge and behaviour.
Social and economic information is critically important for reef management, and the Great Barrier Reef Outlook Report and the strategic assessments that we've done, which will guide our management for the next 25 years, have information from the Social and Economic Long-Term Monitoring Program deeply embedded in those reports. The information in this report helps guide our management decisions and helps us understand the impact of our decisions on the people and the economy and the social makeup along our coast, the 2,300 kilometre coast of the Great Barrier Reef and the communities that live and work there. It tells us interesting things about the people. 25% of the people that live along that coast rely on the Great Barrier Reef in some way for their income. The Outlook Report 2014, the strategic assessments, all relied heavily on social and economic data as much as the data about the corals and the fish. So social and economic monitoring, long term, it's very important for reef management.
Great Barrier Reef is indeed a complex region, ecologically, socially, and economically. I'm Erin Bohinski, and I lead the Working Group for Coastal Communities. For this working group, coastal communities share a sense of place, but they might also share a sense of belonging and social networks. A lot of information already exists about the Great Barrier Reef's coastal communities, so our approach is to tap into existing information that's relevant to reef management. For example, through census information, we can report on the demography of the region's coastal communities and how transient the local population is. We know, for example, that nearly half of the region's residents changed their address at least once in the past 5 years. We can also document major events that occur each year that may drive change in the region's communities. For example, in 2011, more than 90% of the region's local government areas were declared natural disaster areas due to floods and cyclones, and many are still feeling these effects. So this information is important context for decision makers that want to understand the primary data that CELTEM collects, such as residents' beliefs, attitudes, perceptions of threats to the reef, or how much they trust different sources of information. It can also be helpful for decision makers wanting to assess how often local residents need to be updated on rules and regulations.
Developing local rules and regulations is an important part of managing the Great Barrier Reef, especially since about a third of local residents actually love to fish for fun in the Great Barrier Reef. I'm Renee Tobin, and I lead the Working Group for Recreation, which represents not only recreational fishers but also people that love the inspirational and spiritual aspects of the reef. And they dive and they snorkel, walk and camp and use the beaches and the islands as well. To understand how local people use and enjoy the Great Barrier Reef, we interviewed nearly 3,500 local residents using face-to-face techniques in 14 communities up and down the coast. For the first time, we're beginning to understand how local residents use the Great Barrier Reef and how they're dependent on it, as well as the well-being that they derive from it. We also know that a lot of people relate to the Great Barrier Reef. For example, did you know that about 90% of local residents feel like it is their responsibility to protect the reef? We realise it's hard to know how to fit this information into reef management. However, through monitoring, we hope to derive insights into changing levels of stewardship and monitor the effectiveness of initiatives such as Gabroompa's Reef Guardian program that aim to raise awareness of impacts on the reef.
I'm Matt Kernock, and I lead the Tourism Working Group for CELTEM. Tourism is one of the most important industries in our region. Tourism to the Great Barrier Reef contributes more than $5 billion annually to our economy and employs more than 64,000 people. CELTEM offers a very powerful monitoring tool for understanding the current state, pressures and threats to our tourism industry and the resilience of that industry in the face of those threats. In 2013, we conducted face-to-face interviews with nearly 2,500 tourists up and down the coast and nearly all of the major tourism operators in our region as part of our baseline study. Our CELTEM data has highlighted several important facts about tourists and tourism operators that you can access in our report housed within eAtlas and on the NERP website. CELTEM is a finger on the pulse of tourism in the Great Barrier Reef.
I'm Renee Tobin, and I lead the Working Group for Commercial Fishing. Our baseline dataset consists of around 35% of the active commercial fishers in the area. We interviewed about 210 fishers. We will be watching how each of them fares through time and how the industry changes in response to changes such as environmental change, political and cultural changes. This knowledge will help managers better plan for change and also better prepare the industry for change. We're also gaining insights into the commercial fishing industry. For example, we're learning things like fishers value the Great Barrier Reef as much for its biological diversity as for its economic value. And also the first word that comes to mind when commercial fishers think of the Great Barrier Reef is beautiful. I really want to acknowledge the partnership relationship that we have developed with organisations such as Queensland's DAF. DAF collect data on the industry through logbooks and licensing. We've been able to work together and really develop a strong picture of what fishers are doing, where they're going, when they're going and how they're fishing. Combined with the data that we've been collecting through the surveys, we're understanding then why fishers do what they do. And I think we as a partnership are really getting on the right track to support both reef and fisheries management.
Hi, I'm Samantha Stone. I lead the case studies for the working groups. I do the case studies to add richness to the largely quantitative data that we collect for the main part of the CELTEM. In 2013, I concentrated on a small group of commercial fishers and worked closely with them to better understand what it means to be a fisher, why they value the GBR, and to understand the changes that their families and the commercial fishing industries have undergone over the past 50 years or so. These conversations generated a wealth of information that we can use to complement the large data sets that we already have in CellTemp. My hope is that in 2 or 3 years, I'd be able to go and visit the commercial fishers again to update these case studies so that we can better understand the challenges and opportunities that they faced over time. My hope is, too, that we would be able to do this with other stakeholder groups in the GBR. I personally think these case studies have great value. They can help reef managers, along with industry leaders, and the people living in the GBR work closely together to shape the future trajectory of the GBR. They can also help all of us better understand the values, the interests, and the needs of all the diverse groups that the GBR supports.
Capturing the relationship that people have with the Great Barrier Reef is really what the CellTemp tries to do. However, the Great Barrier Reef is potentially really important to lots of people, not just those that live nearby. I'm Jeremy Goldberg, and I lead the National Working Group. Along with Pollinate, a marketing group in Sydney, we interviewed a representative sample of more than 2,000 people all around Australia using online methods. And for me, the results have really hit home about how important the Great Barrier Reef really is to people all around the country. For example, we gave Australians a list of a dozen iconic landscapes and asked them to rank how inspiring they were on a scale from 1 to 10. We randomized the Great Barrier Reef throughout that list, but overwhelmingly, the Great Barrier Reef was Australia's most inspiring landscape. And I was also fascinated to discover that the reef is really a big part of the Australian identity, and there's a tremendous amount of pride in the fact that it's a World Heritage Area. We also found out things like nearly 80% of Australians are concerned about the impacts of climate change on the Great Barrier Reef.
I'm Laia Shell, and I lead the working group related to well-being of the Socioeconomic Long-Term Monitoring Program. As we learn more about the connections between people and natural environments, we also understand the important role that the Great Barrier Reef has to contributing to human and community well-being. And we appreciate more and more the huge work that the managers have in not only managing the Great Barrier Reef for its biophysical dimensions, but also for the contributions that the Great Barrier Reef has on the well-being of society and individuals. One of the most exciting things for me to be part of this long-term monitoring program is that we have been able as a team to capture in a multifaceted way what well-being means in the context of a country like Australia and applicable to the Great Barrier Reef region. And basically we are looking at the notion of well-being in terms of the opportunities that it provides to people when they interface and has relations with the Great Barrier Reef, the empowerment that it allows people to have because of understanding more and participating in its management, and the security that having such a precious and beautiful resources managed effectively into the future has in terms of maintaining environmental services. We have been able to measure a number of those dimensions of well-being across different interest groups, and we have that information available in our website, so I'll encourage you to go and have a look at how well-being in relation to the Great Barrier Reef has impacted a range of different interest groups in this region.
Hi there, my name's Bettina Pert. I have two main roles in the CellTemp. The first is to manage and look after the database. The second is to look at the relationship between people and place within the Great Barrier Reef. Up until now, managers have struggled to understand how the reef has been used, where people go, when and how. Throughout all the CellTemp reports, you will see hundreds of maps scattered throughout which capture the relationship between people and place. One of our most interesting maps is the Favourite Places map, which maps the location of where coastal residents have rated their favourite place is. For example, in 2013, coastal residents indicated that their favourite place was the Whitsundays, Magnetic Island, Cairns and Townsville.
As you can see, the CellTemp is an attempt to capture a snapshot of the current social and economic picture of the Great Barrier Reef region. It's too early for us to know how the conditions are trending, but the potential is there for us to really have our finger on the pulse and to work with community and industry to maximise the benefits of the reef for everyone.
We would love to tell you more. Please check out our website and leave your details. From there, you can download the database directly onto your own computer. Most importantly, do come and find us. We would love to talk with you about social and economic long-term monitoring.